الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So inshallah tonight we are discussing the Siwak. And the Siwak, as we mentioned to you, is a miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a miracle that we have something like this. Something that is pure, something that is natural, and something that we will always have access to insha'Allah ta'ala. The Miswak has many benefits to it. Some of these benefits are dunyawi, and other benefits are akhiri, or for the dunya and the hereafter. So what we mean by that is that some of the benefits is medical benefits, physical benefits, and things that you can actually experience in this world. And when we say these benefits are for the hereafter, obviously these are blessings and rewards that a person is given for using the Siwak. The advantages of Siwak are many. Number one is that the Siwak strengthens the gums and prevents tooth decay. Strengthens the gum and prevents tooth decay. So there's a medical benefit behind it. These are all from the ulama, by the way, and even some of them are even proven from some of the statements of the companions and the tabi'un as well. Another benefit or advantage is that Siwak helps us eliminate toothaches and prevents further increase of decay. So it also prevents toothaches as well. It creates a nice pleasant fragrance in the mouth, which we're going to be talking about the wisdom behind all of this as well. So it gives you a pleasant fragrance in the mouth. Miswak is a cure for illnesses as well. So these are not just restricted to the mouth. This is a thing that a lot of people think. A lot of people think that Siwak, the benefits of it is just whatever's in your mouth. Clean teeth, pleasant breath, pleasant odor, healthy gums. It's not just restricted to that. As a matter of fact, even some ulama talked about how the Siwak helps your breathing and your respiratory system and helps you digest food better. Some of the ulama, even there's a statement amongst the Sahabas that Siwak also increases your memory as well. Siwak also brings clarity to the voice. So if you want to speak, you want to lecture, you want to recite or lead the salah, one of the best ways to do this is to begin by using the Siwak as well. Siwak also eliminates bad odors and improves your taste buds. So you end up actually enjoying food and tasting food a lot better by using the Siwak. Siwak, as we mentioned, sharpens and improves the memory as well. Siwak is also a cure for headaches. Siwak creates nur on the face of the person that continually uses it. A person who uses the Siwak, you will see nur on their face. How do you know you have nur on your face? It's very simple. You know you have nur when your face becomes a pleasant picture for everyone to look at. In other words, when somebody looks at your face, they don't see like a zit, they don't see that you look tired, they don't see that you look old or you look this or that, but they just see calmness and pleasantness in your face. That's why all the ulama, you can look at their pictures or their videos and you can just sit there and stare at them, because you're just admonished by the beauty and the presence in their face. Sheikh Mukhtar al-Shanqiti hafidhahullah is really one of those individuals. Sometimes, you're just looking at how the nur of Allah Azza wa Jal and the acts of worship that you do, how the effects it has on a person. You ever meet somebody where the first meeting that you have with them, somehow things just get connected and you just like them? And you look forward to seeing them again. It's the first time that you've ever met them. I'm sure all of us here, this has happened at some point in your life where you met somebody and they just seem like a really good person and you just want to meet them again and again. That's another sign that the person has nur in their life and especially on their face. The Siwak helps us with that. The Siwak also causes the teeth to glow. In other words, it gives us a sense of shiningness to the teeth as well. The Siwak also assists us in our digestion and how we consume and digest our foods. And we mentioned that the Siwak also brings clarity to our voice. The greatest benefit of using the siwak, however, is that you gain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reward of salah is multiplied as well. It's increased in reward. According to a statement of Ali radiallahu an, the siwak, when you use it, it increases the reward of salah 70 times more. 70 times more blessings of just using the siwak in and of itself or before the salah. When are the timings that are recommended for you to use the siwak? What are the timings that are recommended? Number one is the recitation of the Quran. So before reciting the Quran, it is recommended to use the siwak. Number two is for seeking knowledge and ilm, even if it's just, reading a hadith or reading an article, but just basically being in that state of seeking knowledge, it's also good to use the siwak as well. The third time that it's recommended is when the mouth has an odor to it. So if you ate a particular food or something and you want to remove the odor of that food, obviously the siwak is there for you to use. Another sunnah or recommended time is learning or teaching the religion. So just being a teacher alone, also the siwak is recommended for the teacher to use as well. Making dhikrullah, use the siwak as well. Entering one's home, we know this of the Prophet ﷺ mentions this, that when you enter a home, you should enter the home. Before you do so, use the siwak. What's the wisdom behind that? The wisdom behind that is obviously if you've gone to work all day and you're busy, you've ate your sandwiches, you ate this, that, you've been talking, teaching, doing so much activity all day. The wisdom why you use this before you enter the home is at least you bring a pleasant welcome in the home. You come home, you have some level of cleanliness, everybody's comfortable to see you and things like that. It's not like what you see like on TV when the guy or the person comes home after a long day's work and everybody's like, oh my God, you smell so bad, go take a shower and then we can hug or meet or something. The siwak eliminates that. At least you can bring some level of pleasantness in the home. Another recommended time is before entering any good gathering. So any good gathering as well is that you also want to have a siwak with you. So you want to use a siwak every single time before you sit in the halaqah as well. I do it all the time and I encourage all of you to do the same as well. So that's another thing I'm going to do. Next time we have our halaqah, we're going to pause. Everybody's going to use their siwak for like a minute or two, and then we're going to start our halaqah. So make sure you have your siwak. I'm not going to leave this alone for you guys, okay? Another time that it's recommended is when you're experiencing hunger and thirst. So if you want to actually eliminate, now these are things that guys that, medical tests have happened. People have actually tested the siwak and found these benefits from them. That it also helps to eliminate or to control the hunger and thirst that you might have at that particular moment. The siwak is also good for the suhoor as well. So when you wake up for the suhoor to fast, it is also recommended to use. Generally speaking, it is also recommended before meals and after meals as well. It is also recommended before taking a long journey that you should use the siwak. On returning home from that journey, before going to sleep, and upon awakening. Whenever you wake up, so whether it's during the night, whether you wake up the following day, doesn't matter. It's also good to use the siwak. We're going to talk about the toothbrush and the toothpaste and where it lies and all of this inshallah later. How long should a miswak be? So how long, what's the length of the siwak and how long should it be? The sunnah is to not have a siwak longer than the handspan itself. So you want to make sure that it's at least within the wrist area, up to the middle finger, or any one of the fingers, it's fine. But the point is that you can take the siwak and you can keep it within your handspan. If you can do that, then this is a good length for the siwak. Like I mentioned, we live in a time right now where you'll see a lot of strange things. I mean, in Saudi, the way they sell the siwak, they sell it in like its original form when it's cut off from the tree. So you have like these long siwaks that are pretty much this long. and the guy will just, you'll tell him you want like a riyal worth or 2 riyals of siwak, so he'll chop it into pieces and give it to you. But some people, they don't do that. They're like, give me the whole thing. Clip off the end, and you see the longest siwak in the world, and he's using it while he's going. Because he suddenly feels elevated, or he's more into the sunnah than anyone else. Right? So you don't want to do that. That's actually against the sunnah to do that. The same idea of the thickness of the siwak. The thickness of the siwak should be the tip of the pinky finger itself. If you want it to be the tip of any of the other fingers, generally that's okay. But anything beyond that is against the sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Is it haram? No, it's not. But it's really difficult to use. It's very difficult to use a siwak that's like that thick, and you're cutting, you're gonna start bleeding your gums and all that sort of thing, and it doesn't really clean very well. Unfortunately, we live in a time where these details are overlooked. Basically, the merchant is gonna say to you, well, look, I have a siwak. You either buy it or don't. Somebody else will come and buy it. So it became like that kind of a business thing. You're not going to find the merchant saying to you, well, look, I have this really thick siwak, but it's not from the sunnah, so don't buy it from me. He's just going to sell it to you anyways. That's why you occasionally see people doing that and have those siwaks, and you'll even find them packaged the way that these ones are packaged as well. So you just want to keep that in the back of your mind. How should it be used? We talked about this in our last discussion, that the siwak, for those of you who are joining us that weren't here, the siwak is held like this. So basically the thumb and the pinky finger is at the bottom of the siwak, and the rest of the fingers are controlling it from the top. It's the perfect way to control it. Now, Imam Ahmad rahimahullah says that the sunnah of the siwak is that you use it with your left hand. And the reason why he says that is he goes back to that principle about removing impurities. You should always do it with your left hand, because that was the practice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But according to the vast majority of ulama, the Prophet ﷺ himself, the companions, they would use their right hand when they would handle the siwak. And so that is the majority opinion regarding that. The miswak, let's look a little bit about the history of the miswak itself. The Prophet ﷺ laid great stress on the ummah of using the siwak in and of itself. And this is why in 2 explicit narrations, one of them he says, if it wasn't for hardship, I'd make you do it before every wudu, and in another narration, before every salah. There are numerous advantages to all of this, which we will be talking about inshaAllah. In terms of the history of the siwak is of course a tree twig or a part of a branch that was used to brush the teeth during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. But it's not restricted to that. As a matter of fact, the Prophet ﷺ there was a particular narration that was associated to him that he says that the miswak was the sunnah and the practice of all the prophets and messengers. So what that tells you is that it's possible that the siwak was used by Adam alayhi salam, and it was used by all of the prophets and the messengers that came after him as well. But it became a recommended act during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. But this was something that was always used, was the siwak in and of itself. The Prophet ﷺ once said in an authentic hadith narrated in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, 4 things amongst the practices of the Anbiya. There are 4 things that the prophets and the messengers, they would practice: circumcision, perfume, miswak, and marriage. These are the 4 things that they used to practice. So from this hadith here, it clearly shows that this could have been something that they used to do as well. There are several other ahadith also relating to this as well. The importance of the siwak in Islam. As we mentioned here, they fall under one of 2 categories. There's either a materialistic benefit, which we've gone through many of them, and then there is also a spiritual benefit or a benefit of the akhirah when it comes to the siwak. The Prophet ﷺ once mentioned in a hadith in the Sunan of Ibn Majah, use the siwak, verily it purifies the mouth and it is a pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal. Jibreel alayhi salam encouraged me to use the siwak so much that I feared it would be obligatory upon the ummah. If I did not fear imposing hardship upon my ummah, I would have made it obligatory upon every single person. Verily, I use the siwak so much that I fear. Listen to the words of the Prophet ﷺ here now. He says, I use the siwak so much that I am afraid the front part of my mouth will start to peel. So what's happening here is if you use the siwak like this, and it's always rubbing against your lip. So what the Prophet ﷺ is talking about is that the siwak will eventually cause his lip to peel. Like that's how often he would use the siwak. It really gives you an appreciation of how clean the Prophet ﷺ was. How clean he was even with his mouth and his attire as well. There are many ahadith. Another narration narrated by Aisha radiallahu anha. She mentions the Prophet ﷺ used to practice using the siwak, used to practice using it before the witr salah, before the tahajjud prayers, and he also used it and he made it fard upon me for all the remaining prayers. So this is his wife speaking. She says that he used to use it for the witr prayer, then he would use it again for tahajjud, and then he would tell his wife to use it so much to practice as though it was compulsory upon you to use it. And even the Prophet ﷺ himself used the siwak so much that people would think that it was actually wajib to use that siwak. Imam Ghazali rahimahullah in his book Ihya Ulum al-Din, he mentions that there are various adab and etiquettes of the siwak with respect to sleeping. And he mentions that the siwak also helps us fall asleep in a more comfortable manner. It encourages a person to sleep more relaxed and get a better night's rest. And even there is a statement amongst the ulama, whenever you sleep, use the siwak anyways. Now, the siwak upon entering the home, we discussed this, and this is based on a statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and also Aisha radiallahu anha. And she says that the first thing that he would do whenever he entered the home is that he would use the siwak. So basically, guys, you need to have one of these everywhere you go. Like even in your car, even if in your pocket, wherever you are, the siwak is something that you should always have with you. As a matter of fact, some of the companions in their battles, Battle of Uhud and all the other different battles, they used to keep the siwak inside the handles of their swords. So even during the battle itself, they used to use the siwak as well. Another narration mentions that some of the companions used to take the siwak and they used to stuff it inside their turban. So when it came time for the wudu, it would be easily accessible for them and they would use it all the time. So it was something that was a part of their lifestyle. They wouldn't just have it for, let's go to the masjid or let's go read Quran. It was always with them. So you want to have a couple of these. You want to have one at your home, your car, and when you're going in and out of places, you always want to keep one with you as well. The miswak of leaving the home, we mentioned, this is also the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We mentioned also before and after the meals. The Prophet Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he mentions, I have used the miswak before sleeping, after rising, meaning waking up, before eating and after eating, and since ever I heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam advising me to do so. So it was a constant habit, but then eventually when he heard the Prophet ﷺ encourage him to do so, he never left it alone. We talked about the miswak should be used when reciting Quran. Now, some ulama, they mentioned that when you recite Quran and you start off with the siwak, it'll actually give you more stamina to continue reciting longer. You know how a lot of people, when they recite Quran, they're always, they want to read, but their mind is lazy or their mind is tired. One of the ways to eliminate that is to use the siwak. And inshallah, it'll encourage you to continue to recite. Why? Because the fluency in the Arabic language will come easier to the tongue when the siwak is used. Second benefit when it comes to reciting the Quran is the clarity in the Arabic language. So the ulama, they said that you know you're a good reciter when you can recite like the Arabs. Because obviously the Quran is in their language and they would know how to pronounce the words, and the eloquency in the language is perfected by them. That's why the top top reciters in the world are all Arabs. Most of them, and they all come from Egypt or other parts of the world, they're Arabs. And the reason for this here is, of course, not just because this is their language, but part of it is the siwak in and of itself. If you want to build that fluency in the recitation of the Quran, the siwak assists you in doing that. That's why a lot of people don't understand why I call this a miracle of Allah. This is why I call this a miracle. Because of all of these different narrations that we have of when to use the siwak. A miswak should also be used on Fridays as well. The Prophet ﷺ once said, "O Muslims," and he said this on Friday, on Jum'ah day as well. And he says, "O Muslims, Allah has made this day, Friday, a day of Eid for the Muslims. Therefore take a shower, use perfume, and use the siwak on this day as an obligation to you." So make it fard upon yourself that you will use the siwak on the Friday as well. The miswak during the fasting, the Prophet ﷺ himself used to do this whilst he was fasting. Now, when it comes to toothbrush, toothpaste, and these other things that we use in our times now, this here actually has in a lot of ways acted as a substitute for us when it comes to cleaning our teeth. It's acted as a substitute where most people don't use the siwak in the morning anymore. I mean, it's something kind of like absurd. You wouldn't use it. You need to have your, Colgate and toothpaste and, your toothbrush. You need to have that. And the reason why is because we want that refreshing feeling when we brush our teeth. Well, some of the ulama said that because of that notion and because of that idea, the ideology that we have embedded in our societies that you're only clean if you use toothpaste, this is why this here has become one of those forgotten sunnahs. It is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to use the siwak even in the morning. This was their toothbrush. So every time they would wake up, this is what they would start their day. As a matter of fact, I encourage this as well. I would encourage you, if you can, to try to wake up one day and just use the siwak alone and see how that feels. And if you want to use the toothpaste after because you're not feeling that freshness, then by all means go ahead and do that as well. But the point is that this is all part of you preserving the siwak in your life, preserving it as much as you can. The Sahabas or the companions when it came to the siwak. Some of the Sahabas, including Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, he mentions that the siwak, treat it as an obligation upon you and don't be neglectful. Be constant in using it, for verily in it lies the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal, the merciful, and its greater reward is in the salah. So Ibn Abbas mentions that the most reward that you get for using the siwak is just before the prayers itself. So again, I can't enforce this for Isha because that might be short notice for some of us. Next salah, try to have a siwak with you. Don't come and pray unless you got a siwak with you. I'm telling you, brothers and sisters, what I found, I don't know of any evidence for this. It's just something for myself. I've been using the siwak for a lot of years. What I have found for myself is every time I start off a salah, whether I'm leading it or I'm following in it, every single time I start off in prayer, I've always found that when I use the siwak, my focus and my concentration, my khushu' in the salah just seems to be that much stronger. I don't know why. I don't know if it's something like psychologically wrong with me or it's something that I'm just perceiving it in this manner. I don't know. But if there was some truth to that, it just only adds to the miracle of the siwak itself. So try to do that. Another companion once mentioned that there are two things of a Muslim that are the best. Two things, if he does it, these are the best things that a Muslim can do. And he says, performing tahajjud salah, and then constantly using the siwak. Performing tahajjud and constantly using the siwak. The ulama, Imam al-Shawkani rahimahullah, he mentions that the miswak is one of the laws of our sharia, and it is as clear as the daylight, and this has been confirmed by everyone and the people of this world. Some of the adab or the mannerisms when it comes to the siwak itself. The majority of the ulama, they say that siwak is not fard. Okay, so it's not compulsory for a person to use the siwak. However, despite all of this, the sharia still gives a great amount of importance in using it. So the majority of ulama, they said as a result that the siwak is mustahab. It is highly recommended to use it. What does that mean? If you use it, Allah gives you a reward. But if you don't use it, Allah doesn't punish you for not using it as well. But obviously you lose out on that great reward. Here's a statement that's very, very, very true and very, very interesting. One great scholar used to say, he who becomes neglectful about the adab is deprived of the sunnahs. In other words, the person who doesn't have good akhlaq, doesn't have good etiquette, is a person that will be deprived of sunnah acts of worship. Which is very true. Most of the people who don't have good manners, they are not going to find them that those are the guys that are going to be praying all their sunnah prayers, that are going to be giving the extra charity, that are going to be smiling, that are going to be saying salams to everybody. They're not going to be doing those sunnah acts of worship. So it's been deprived from them. Why? Because of the akhlaq issue. Then it continues. And he who neglects the sunnahs is deprived of the fara'id or the compulsory acts. So one of the ways that why the compulsory acts becomes difficult is because we would neglect the sunnah acts that evolve around it. This is why a lot of people, they ask, every time I pray salah or every time I want to give zakat or something, I always have to force myself to do it. And whenever it's time to pray, I have to force myself to pray. Well, this is because you're missing a lot of the sunnah acts that evolve around salah, that evolve around the Quran and other things like that. So here, it's a ripple effect. Then it continues, and he who becomes neglectful of the fara'id is deprived of its reward in the hereafter. So eventually the person loses everything. You neglect all that's compulsory, then the person becomes humiliated in the akhirah. Then it continues, the types of siwak. The types of siwak, it is permissible to use all the types of tree twigs, provided that these are not harmful and poisonous. So obviously, the siwak, any tree twig you find generally is okay. But you also want to make sure that it's safe to use as well. It is obviously haram to use anything that's poisonous or anything that would cause an effect, a negative effect in your mouth. Now, there are a couple of trees that are haram because there are specific ahadith about them. The pomegranate or the rumman tree is haram to use its branches or its twigs as a siwak. The bamboo tree as well, it is haram to use that as a siwak. I hope I can say this word right, the chambali tree, spelled Chambeli. This is a type of tree. I haven't looked this one up here in particular, and just to kind of have a picture of how it is. But this is also a specific hadith the Prophet ﷺ specified. This is one of the trees that you don't want to use a siwak for. The Prophet ﷺ also mentions the type of siwaks that are recommended. Now people ask this all the time. There's so many different kinds of siwaks, so which one is recommended? Number one is a type that comes from a tree called the Peelo tree. The Peelo tree, P-E-E-L-O, P-E-E-L-O, the Peelo tree. Then the second type of tree is the Zaytun or the olive tree itself. Then the third type is a bitter tree. So any tree that has some bitterness to it is also permissible. And also another type of tree is the walnut tree itself. Now the miswak of the Peelo tree, the first category that we mentioned, The Prophet ﷺ mentions that the miswak of the pillow tree is the best one. Now, how do you know when you have the pillow tree? Some scholars, they said it's like a greenish color. We don't have access to these pillow trees. They grow more in the hotter countries, in the the Arab worlds and things like that. It grows in there. It doesn't grow in this here because the winter would kill this kind of tree. So this kind of tree here, it's like the greenish, brownish color or shade to the siwak itself, and it has a very, very strong and bitter taste to it. This is the kind of siwak that you'll find on the floors of the haram, all throughout in Mecca and Medina. Those old Bedouins that are sitting there, this is the kind of siwak that they sell as well. Then you have the zaytun or the olive tree. This is the very hard siwak. Like sometimes the Arabs, what they would do is they take this kind of siwak and they would have to soak it in water overnight before it would soften. Like their teeth just wouldn't do the job. It's a very hard and it's very, very smooth. It's as if somebody has just like scraped off all the edges from it and it just became a perfect smooth surface. This is that type of tree as well. The pillow tree, the Prophet ﷺ, as a matter of fact, even some of the ulama, they mentioned this as well, that the pillow tree is very good for getting the glowness or the cleanliness, the glitter of your teeth. So when you smile, then you see that shiningness, like that star that comes out of your teeth. Well, the way to get that is, of course, from this type of siwak, the one that has the strong bitter taste to it. The Prophet ﷺ also recommended this type of siwak to use because this was the siwak that was mostly available to them. He recommended all the companions to use this as well. And he also used to give this type of siwak as gifts to other people as well. He would give them as gifts to other people. And he would tell them, use the siwak of the pillow tree. Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he mentions, I always used to keep a whole stock or a bunch of these pillow siwaks for the Prophet ﷺ. As you all know, Ibn Mas'ud, he used to live with the Prophet ﷺ for some time. And it was described that no Sahaba resembled the Prophet ﷺ in how he walked more than Ibn Mas'ud. Nobody could walk like the Prophet ﷺ. So from the back, you would just think it was really him. But obviously, height-wise and so on, it was different because Ibn Mas'ud, he was a midget. So he was a very short individual. The miswak of the olive tree, this here was also one of the sunnah siwaks. The Prophet ﷺ, he spoke highly of this type of tree as well. And he mentions, use the miswak of the olive tree, because it is a miswak that has barakah in it. So it's has some virtuousness in it. It purifies and makes the mouth wholesome, clean, and pleasant. So what is the significance of the olive tree siwak? This is where you can eliminate the odor of the mouth. So it's especially used for that. It also mentions that it removes the yellowness of the teeth as well. This happens a lot where over time and over age, or depending on what we eat or so on, we find a little bit of that yellow discolor on the siwak itself. So one of the ways to eliminate that is with this type of siwak. The bitter tree, if none of these are available, then the third category is, of course, the bitter tree itself. Any bitter tree can be used, and that's fine. And the walnut tree, of course, is the last option. One of the sunnah acts of using the siwak is that you also want to have an intention as well, because the niyyah of using the siwak should be made in order to affirm and to confirm the reward of using that siwak, or else it'll just be a regular practice. So you want to have in your heart a niyyah, that an intention that you're using the siwak for whatever purpose, but more so to please Allah and follow the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let's look at some of the etiquettes really quickly. The siwak should be a straight twig. So you should try to avoid siwaks that have a real roughness to it. So you always want to know, when you pick up a siwak, it has at least a nice smooth surface over it, at least the best that you can find. The siwak should also be clean. So if you see markings, if you see some decay in the branch itself, you don't want to use that kind of siwak. The siwak should also be soft and not too hard. The best way to get a siwak, take the siwak and bend it. And if you can bend it almost where my thumb is, so this tip here can almost reach my thumb, that's when you know you have a very good and very fresh siwak. So you want to bend it and see that. You know, a lot of the ones that are in the packages are excellent for this as well. By the way, I only learned that from one Bedouin. There was a Bedouin that was sitting on the floor in Medina, and I asked him the question. I was like, I mean, how do I know what's a fresh siwak? And wallahi, he gave me the fiqh behind this. He's like, this. And he's like, sit down, sit down, sit down. So I sat down on the floor there, and I'm in front of him, right? I took a picture of him even because of this. And he's like, this is how you know the siwak. And he's like, kida, bend it. He's like, no. He said, don't bend it too much. It's got to be in the right degree, right? So it was like a whole science for him, and he was really proud of it. But alhamdulillah, it taught me, from that point forward, how to choose a good, fresh siwak. Then also, one of the etiquettes is that the siwak should not be used while lying down. It should not be used while lying down. This is for one obvious reason, and that is, the siwak is a cleansing tool. So whatever you're cleaning, what's going to happen? You're going to end up consuming it. So you don't want to do that. You want to be able to dispose, or you want to be able to spit out whatever impurities are there. A siwak, as we mentioned, should be the length of a handspan at least. The siwak should be no thicker than at least the tip of the fingers. Before using the siwak, you should wash it. Because it's been exposed to the outdoors, so you want to do that as well. The ones here that we have in the package may not require that, so that's okay. After using it as well, you also want to wash off the tip. A lot of people ask though, when do you remove this tip? This tip here, you can remove it at your own discretion. You decide when you want to do this. For a lot of the Arabs, what they would say is that the tip, you don't have to physically remove it. It falls off after some time during like wear and tear. It eventually falls off on its own, and then you can scrape off or shave off a new piece. Personally, for me, that takes a long time. So I kind of prefer that I use a scissors and I cut off this piece after like a day or two, and then I shave myself a brand new piece there, and then I continue to use it. That's just my preference and how I like to use it as well. It should also be placed it should also be placed in a respectful area. It shouldn't be just thrown on the ground anywhere. You should keep it in a safe place. This is also part of the etiquettes of preserving it. You should also not try to suck the siwak itself and try to, when you're done, a lot of people do this. They'll use the siwak and they'll like, I don't know why they would do that. It sounds kind of nasty. Well, it is, because basically all the bacteria there, you're just consuming it. So this is actually against the sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ used to spit. And Aisha and other companions used to narrate this, that we used to see him whenever he used it, he would spit in a corner after. So you want to remove those. That's the whole purpose of the siwak anyways. You also want to make sure that if the miswak is dry, it should be moistened in water. So this happens a lot in our times, especially in the winter and summer and things like that. So you can just put it in the water. This is actually mustahab. It is actually recommended that if your siwak does dry up, the Prophet ﷺ used to actually dip it in some water and leave it there for some time, just to kind of moisten it as well and to keep some of that freshness. Today, you may not have to do that. One of the best ways to preserve your siwak and keep it fresh is take a paper, like a paper bag. So you don't want just a regular piece of paper. You want the paper bag that if you go to like a restaurant, that kind of material. And then you wrap up the siwak and put it in the fridge and keep it there. Wallahi, I tell you, I've been doing it for a long time. Sometimes you can keep that siwak for 2 or 3 months and it's as fresh as the day you bought it. And it's one of the best ways to preserve it. So you can do that as well. It works great. The siwak should not be used in the washrooms. Obviously for us here, there's a different issue with that, because you're in front of the sink and you want to use the siwak. This sunnah act, what it's referring to is during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the toilet was one area and bathing was something else, was in a different area. That's why toilet in Arabic is called mirhad, and the shower area is called hammam. But in our times, we use hammam for both. But linguistically, that's incorrect. Mirhad is what the actual toilet that a person uses, and hammam is a place where there's a shower. So what this is talking about is using it where the toilet is. The problem for us is our washrooms, the way they're designed, is Allahul Musta'an, you have both of them in one room. So that sunnah is gone, and it's very difficult to do that. So here what the ulama advise us is that as long as the toilet is nowhere near the sink, so a lot of the washrooms today, the toilet will be behind you, this is okay. It's still sort of in a restricted area, and so you can still use it within over the sink and wash yourself, and it's completely fine. It's one of those sensitive, touchy issues that's very difficult to get around, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. The siwak should be used at least 3 times a day, and it should start off by the upper teeth. So start off by using the upper teeth and then work your way down to the lower teeth, and you want to do this at least 3 times. So especially when it's time for the salah, some people will be like, oh my god, let me just brush my whole mouth really quickly, really fast until the imam says Allahu Akbar. No, what is sufficient of the sunnah is 3 times. So 3 times the entire mouth. So you start off once, top, bottom, then 2, then 3, and that's sufficient enough. Also, part of the etiquettes of the siwak is that you should not cut both ends. So don't shave off this end and don't shave off this end as well. Choose one end and stick with that. Again, this is the practice of the Prophet ﷺ. Another etiquette when it comes to the siwak is the siwak should be used in a very gentle manner. I mean, like I said, a lot of people when they use the siwak, they really get in there and they're like, oh my god, and they're like, oh, okay, they start turning it and twisting it. You don't want to do that. The siwak is it's a very subtle thing to use where it should lightly tap your teeth, and this is sufficient enough. Like I said, this is part of the miracle of the siwak. So you lightly want to tap the teeth and use the siwak. This is sufficient enough. So you don't want to get all crazy and get all extreme with the siwak itself and get carried away with it. As we mentioned to you, one of the other benefits as well of the siwak is a cure for illnesses. It also eliminates slime. You ever find, some of us may have this problem where, when you're talking and you do this, and so the Prophet ﷺ said that when لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى, and you're always swallowing, well, this here, the siwak eliminates that. At least you can have some fluency and some consistency in your voice as well. It's an excellent detail when it comes to the siwak. Finally, brothers and sisters, inshallah, we want to conclude, if you don't have a siwak, what is the sunnah practice? Number 1, use the fingers. The Prophet ﷺ, some of the companions didn't have access to siwak, so it was permissible for them to use the fingers as well. And of course the index finger, and also the forefinger, and even the thumb as well, all of these are from the sunnah. So at least these 3 fingers are all from the sunnah that a person can use to cleanse their mouth as best as they can. And of course, if you don't want to use the finger, and you don't have access to a siwak, then of course the regular toothbrush that we have today is sufficient enough. I hope that insha'Allah ta'ala, that kind of gives you a brief insight of how beautiful this simple siwak that we have and how much it means to us. This is part of our identity. Your children, parents, if they don't know about the siwak, go ahead and get them one and try to train them and teach them to start using the siwak. And children, continue to do this. Make the siwak a part of your life for the rest of your life, insha'Allah ta'ala. Live on this earth with the siwak beside you and leave this earth with the siwak beside you as well. This is a true miracle of Allah Azza wa Jal, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us to preserve this great sunnah of our Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So this is where we will pause, insha'Allah ta'ala. Of course, as you all know, we do not have a halaqah this Friday or the Sunday because of the lecture series. So again, I want to encourage all of you to come inshallah, and join us for these lecture series. They will start on Friday after Asr. So after Asr, one of the shuyukh, them, they will be here, and it will start inshallah, and that will continue until Isha, as well as all day Saturday and all day Sunday. The list of all the shuyukh, you will see that when on the poster when you leave the masjid, it's outside here. The sisters, you also have that on your section as well. So we encourage you all to join us insha'Allah ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to perfect our salawat. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to perfect our wudu. And most of all, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our efforts in this world and reward us in the hereafter. So these are the words that we conclude with. وَآخِرُ دَعْوَانَا أَنِ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَةُ اللَّهِ وَبَرَكَاتُهُ.